All right, fellow humans. This is a very exciting day. We've got a novel podcast, the first of
No.
its kind. I'm here with my brother Steve, my
Oh,
good friend. Steve, how are you today?
I'm well. How about you, Alex?
I'm doing great. Feeling great. Happy 11/11, by the way. Just realized, I don't think we planned it that way, but we're starting our podcast.
Remembrance Day.
Yeah. What is it? Remembrance Day?
In Canada, it's Remembrance Day. Yeah.
Remembrance for what?
Uh, it's basically like a day where we remember. It's Veterans Day.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. But now instead of poppies, we wear masks because the
Yeah, we
freedom of.
got to remember. We got to remember that there's an invisible killer out there.
Exactly.
Oh my god. Yeah, and then also it's the synchronistic day of remember we are in a hologram day here on the Medicine Trails podcast. I want to start off. I'm curious um if you're interested or willing to share a little bit about your concept of medicine trails.
So the whole thing kind of started when this whole pandemic started. And so I've been a youth worker for 14 years. Before I moved up north, I worked for the Urban Native Youth Association. And when we all worked from home, I kind of went up north to my parents and worked from there. And I made videos for the youth on me gathering medicines. Or in one video, I explored a bear den, actually crawled into the bear den and took a video of it. And that's how the idea of medicine trail started. Like I called it Steve's Medicine Trail, my video. And but like if you look at life as a whole, there's many different paths we take as humans. And in my last 10 years, learning from various indigenous elders, there's also many paths you can take on your own healing. And for me, medicine trails is a combination of my life, not just going out into the bush and looking for medicines and different herbs. In general, like I came through many different paths and avenues in life to become the being or the person that I am now. And I think medicine trail sums it up perfectly, actually.
Yeah, I concur. I concur, doctor. It's yeah, there's no one path. I mean, maybe the only, it's important. It's more important now than ever to address that because, I mean, for one, there's so many people on the planet, even though we all come from the same source. Everyone has their own unique experience, unique to their own path. And oftentimes, especially nowadays, we're being more than encouraged, almost forced to take one particular path to wherever that destination may be. And there's that sense of, we gotta, you want to go down a path that's going to get you your destination, and here's the prescribed path. But it's almost counterintuitive to today's narrative that, you have the GPS within you, so to speak, and you're always connected to that source. And if you follow down that path and you start to learn some really interesting things, and we live in a culture where it's there's not as much guidance along these paths as maybe there used to be, or at least informed, wise guidance along these paths. So it sounds like this is a good approach, a good shamanistic approach to the paths of life.
Yeah, like I don't know, if one could argue that this was the goal, or that's what they were going for all along. If you look at governments, if you have a society that is connected to the land, that is connected to the creator, connected to their own medicine, such societies are not easy, like you can't govern them in a sense like we are governed at the moment. And I think from early on, colonization, you know, the Romans going after the Celts and so forth, it was almost like orchestrated, you know, that we become a society that is living without a sense of connection to something higher than ourselves, absolutely alienated to the land and the medicines that grow on it. So I feel like if we want to kind of escape this nightmarish hell that we're steering towards, we need to get back on those trails, you know, we need to go out onto the land. We need to become familiar with what grows on the land, what can help us and our families. We need to find a sense of belonging again, you know, and not just like, oh, I belong to kind of this country or to this political party, but a sense to belonging in the universe, you know. We have to go back to creator's law, natural law, and hopefully find ourselves again, because it seems like humanity, we're pretty much running around like chickens with our heads cut off at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. And think talking about trails and paths and ancient forging of these paths, it's interesting to think, or I'm curious because I mean, we look at the world today. Let's look at two very contrasting images into the mind here. You've got the bush or the woods, as we call it down here, down south. There's a forest where it's uncharted, just a wilderness terrain on one side. And then look at another image. Imagine like New York City or something. You've got all these pre-made roads and trails like that basically confine us to particular avenues of journeying. You know, almost even think of like on one side you've got the Pac-Man box with all the different lines, and this is where Pac-Man can go, versus on the other side there's a wilderness. And what you're talking about makes me think of like, it's not even necessarily a physical trail, because of course just diving deep into what is the deep meaning behind this, and is that there's a trail within, there's a spiritual journey that we're all on, whether we know it or not. And the nightmarish world that comes to mind is that Pac-Man box, or that New York City, whatever city, kind of, here are the trails you go down. And then, you know, and like good things come, a lot of things, bad things that we have in the world start off in a good place, where let's say we come to that wilderness and maybe it's dangerous in the wilderness, or there's a lot of threats, there's, you know, or even not even just threats, there's certain, let's say, environmental habitats. We don't want to disturb the bears, we don't want to step on all the little mini ecosystems that are thriving within there. So, you know, laying out a particular trail, whether it's actually carving out a path on the ground or marking trees or something. Like when I was a little kid, my dad used to take me out to this place, Pelton Pond, out in the woods in New York, where we would take, you know, just follow. It was kind of like an open wilderness area, but there were little markers on the trees just so you kind of know where to go. And that to me is like one of the shamanistic aspects of this, and what I'm imagining your maybe what your intention is, and correct me if I'm wrong, or please elaborate, just kind of like having these subtle little markers along the way. So as we go on this journey, just to not to tell people where to go, but to encourage people, like, it's safe to go along this journey. And there are people that have gone down these paths before, or these ways, without having to tell people this is the way to go. It's like, hey, the wilderness is your oyster, but also, you know, just be mindful about where you're walking, be mindful about how you get to this destination.
No, absolutely. Like, I feel like it's important that we have the ability to explore this vast wilderness ourselves. But if you look in like old days or indigenous cultures, they had always milestones, you know, like becoming of age ceremonies and things like that, where in a sense, from an early age on, they were guided on this path and their responsibility within the communities. And we don't have this anymore these days. what you get is a cell phone, and you get lost in TikTok and Facebook, which in a sense then takes you on another path, you know. Like, I think it's important to understand too that medicine paths or medicine trails, there can be what they call in the Cree culture the sweetgrass way, or the red road as it is also referred to, or there's the black road, you know. One is a road, let's say for instance, the black road is a road that we endeavor on when we're led by our ego, when we're like feeding our lower impulses, and it's about ego and narcissism and all those things. And the other trail that we can embark on in life would be the sweetgrass way, where we live to serve, and we live with love and beauty and kindness and all those things. And
yeah, I mean, and it's important to I mean, it's important in that breakdown of the two, and that's, I'm sure we could talk more about this as well, that a lot of our world is categorized into, you know, these two different ways, whether you want to look at it like the yin yang, or even like science and spirit or something, or there's these I mean, there's of course infinite ways to go, but if you want to look at it in simplistic ways, there's these two things. So even though there's the path of the ego, and then there's the path of the higher spiritual evolution, if you will, it's important that we have these two choices available, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just it just seems that
you know, it's going to be hard to always walk on the sweetgrass way per se. Life is just of such nature that we will fall off once in a while and venture onto the other path. You know, it's just a matter of fact of getting back. What I kind of was trying to point out earlier is that it seems like that society is set out in a way that we're made unaware of the other path intentionally. You know, everything is like set up with, it's so competitive, and we're looking at other people's Facebook and TikToks and Instagram stories, and then we strive to be like those people. Like, all the role models that are put in front of us are necessarily not necessarily good ones. You know, it kind of begs to question if there is false idols that we idolize on purpose, you know. But
yeah, it definitely seems that way. There are these false idols, and this is not anything new. This is something that's been going on for such a long time, and we in our culture today, like, talk about deliberately concealing that other path, the path of higher learning and everything, and the path of spirit. I mean, talk about deliberately creating a situation where we are almost incapable of remembering past yesterday or a week ago, or, like, to put it even further back, 500 years ago. We don't live in that world. We're in our culture, at least in the Western culture, we're always guided to look or provoked to look forwards, and just, you know, the past is the past. But it's funny that, you know, even just to go back to the trail analogy, and there's that story of Hansel and Gretel, which has got all sorts of like symbolic meaning to it in one way, but there's the idea of like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. It's almost like our culture has completely ignored where we've come from, to the point where we're just walking aimlessly into this future and calling it progress. And this whole idea of worshiping something that's outside of ourselves, disconnected from ourselves, is nothing new, but it's mythologized and almost debunked as completely irrelevant. But on the other end, how important it is that we recognize, ask ourselves, where did this thing come from? Where did this sense of forgetting and disconnection and separation, looking outside of ourselves as separate for the answers, where did all of this come from? These are the kinds of questions that I think are just like, I mean, they definitely, like, the revolution will not be televised. Like, there are more, I would have to argue that there are more people now than ever asking these questions and sharing their opinions in a way that has never happened or hasn't happened in a really long time. So that's a positive thing. But on the other hand, like, yeah, there are a lot of forces out there that are trying to demonize and stigmatize that whole action and way of life of asking and remembering and connecting.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the fact again that they don't want us to be so sovereign, you know, they don't want us to be free thinker, they don't want us to be self-sufficient, because then this whole charade would fall apart, you know. Like if we would live in communities again where we raise our own, or raise, like grow our own food. If you want to raise your own cattle, I mean, that would be an option. You would have your own medicine and you would take care of your own, then you wouldn't have to have like a politician who tells you how to live your life moment by moment, you know. And I think the problem is too that if you would look how a society would run in the most perfect way, you obviously would have one of the most spiritual, most enlightened people, kind of the elders running the community. The women probably would be in charge again because let's face it, men are a little bit loose cannons. Like if you look at old cultures, it all made sense why they were run the way they were run and why they were like colonized and why it was under attack, this way of life. Because this whole facade, it couldn't hold up.
No, not at all.
And like if you look at it, like we elect politicians, like they haven't done anything in their lives that would warrant them to be in a position like this. We don't look at them and say, hey, like how much have they given away? Like let's say in older Coast Salish cultures where the chief was elected by how much he gave away to the community, which was a big driving factor, you know, like how much have they given of themselves? How much have they served? How kind are they? How knowledgeable are they? How wise are they? What is their connection to the land and to spirit? None of this plays a factor. We run big campaigns with money from donors, and eventually we just elect some guy that hasn't, in my opinion, proven to be in any position of power, you know?
Yeah. And that's
just kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, it absolutely is mind blowing, and the whole, a lot of it is the language and how language as a form of complex symbolism, how symbols are absolutely and totally in our world determined by the way that we perceive them, not the actual symbol itself. And now we're in a world where power is determined in a particular way that is not what a lot of the indigenous cultures perceived as that particular symbol. Like power in itself is all about that, like you said before, of this competition and striving to dominate and control and, you know, winner or loser. It's really leaned so hard into that one side or the other that like it just cuts its nose to spite its face, to use that classic expression. Even to mention too, in the United States, the formation of what we consider to be as one of the beacon of democracy, right? And, you know, democracy, the concept of democracy was around for a really long time, but a living, breathing, functional action and version of this concept in action didn't really come around, and in the minds of a lot of people didn't come around until the United States was founded. But that is completely incorrect, to the point where we forgot about how it's been, again, deliberately written out of the history and forgotten because of the colonization and the dominator culture stuff. The Iroquois Nation in upstate New York now, which is actually the longest standing democracy in the world. People think ancient Greece with democracy, like the concept of basic democracy of voting, you know, like, okay, for this person who put however many gray stones, you get the gray stones and I get the red stones, and however many, whoever, you know, the majority wins the action. Like that very basic democracy has been around time, but the whole long time. But the representative, more complex, what we consider to be democracy today, that has been a long standing in the Iroquois Nation. And a lot of what America's principles of democracy come from not just, I mean, there's all the ideas in the Renaissance and the the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, a lot of these thinkers that were imagining this world and conceiving of it philosophically, it's underestimated how much the whole system was based on looking at the example of what the Iroquois Nation was doing. Like when we talk about voting, how equal rights and everything, one of the two big differences in the Iroquois Nation that were not initiated in American democracy when it first started, and even still to this day, in a lot of cases, are number one, when it came to choosing or electing a leader for their people, only people that were allowed to vote were women, which is really amazing because, like you said, men can be loose cannons and oftentimes are. When it comes to choosing a leader, men will naturally want to pick like the strongest warrior guy to do it. And that there's some important qualities to that. You want somebody who's strong and powerful in that way. But the women had the wisdom and the maternity factors to choose not just somebody who's strong, but also who could be loving and has good caretaker qualities, who's gonna protect the children and not just like lead us into a war because they don't like, they see a competition between some other tribe or something. And then the second big one was in America, you've got the two major houses of representative bodies. You've got the House of Representatives, however, and then you've got the Senate. The Senate has more power than the House. And this was in the Iroquois Nation, still to this day. But big difference was that in their version of the Senate was called the Council of Grandmothers, where instead of two representatives from each state or tribe or mini, area within the collective, it was all of the elder women that were in charge. So when it came to the big time decisions of whether or not to go to war, where to move if they needed to move, any big decisions came down to the grandmothers, the women.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
no, like Tom, like this, our Sundance chief, like he tells the story too, and it's not really mine to tell, but there was a point where the white people came, and I can't really remember what nation they went to, but they wanted to speak to the man, and then the man went to the women, like you said, the Council of Grandmothers, and said, look, those men came here, and apparently like they knew that this white race will come eventually, and they talked to the grandmothers. They said they want to speak to men, so they did the ceremony. But even though the man then went to go speak to the man, it was still the women that were in charge, Yeah, and they led that whole thing. But
yeah, well, it's never too late to get back to this way. And honestly,
right now we kind of run into the problem though that they're mixing everything up a little bit,
Yeah.
Like everybody was so excited that they would have had Hillary Clinton in the White House, and my apologies, I'm not an American, I shouldn't speak on that. But
you have my permission.
If you would have put her in the White House, you wouldn't have had a woman in there either, right? Like if a woman leads like a man or thinks like a man, then the physical appearance doesn't matter, like things wouldn't have changed, and you see that more and more in society now, this mass confusion regarding gender and its attributes, like there's such a big emphasis right now on toxic masculinity, which obviously man can be toxic, but just because some men present manly and are strong, it can be a good quality. You can be very protective of your family, you can be hardworking, you can be strong, go out in the bush and get meat for the winter, stuff like this, not necessarily everything is a toxic masculine thing. And that goes for the women's side as well, like this whole thing with equal rights. I totally get it. Like women should vote, women should have same pay as men, but we still have different attributes, like women are naturally more loving and caring when they have a child. So that's a good thing, and I think like ripping mothers away from their families so that they can work and children get raised in daycares, in my opinion, is not a good thing. Like if you, again, look in old culture, and I hope I'm not gonna, you know, cause a lot of anger here, there was two separate camps. There was a man camp and there was a women camp. And that wasn't done because they were cruel and they thought women need to be in their own camp or men need to be in their own camp. Everything was done in according to natural and sacred law, you know? And we all kind of like disregard all that. And now a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. I mean, they can. That's all fine and dandy, you know? Like you can do what you feel like do what you want to do. But it still causes, in my opinion, a kind of an imbalance in the natural world, if you look at it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And hold on one second. Sorry.
And I mean, no disrespect, you know, like,
Yeah.
I mean,
No, of course. And of course not. And I think it'd be good for anyone listening or watching right now to bring up this concept of two-spirited people in the indigenous cultured way, because like, just because there were like in a Sundance or in a lot of ceremonies, I'm sure, where there's, you know, men on one side, women on the other side. It's not designed to be, you know, because of segregation of like, you know, you belong over there, we belong over here. It's keep it separate. There's an honoring of the particular inherent qualities of these things. But two-spirited people, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, because there's an honoring, there's a major honoring that comes with that, right?
yeah, they're major powerful because they have two spirits, right? They have the male and the female spirits. But
Yeah.
then, like, what we have forgotten as humanity too is that we all have that. We all have a masculine side and a feminine side. And we all can nurture that, you know? Like I can still be a strong man that protects my family and can work in the bush and I can haul things, and I have a physical strength that a woman may not have. And I think this alone maybe can get me in trouble again. But we all have that. And I think our goal is to bring those two together, to find a balance and harmony between our masculine and feminine. And ultimately, that would be a complete being then. You know, if you look in esoteric tradition, the goal eventually would be, after incarnation, that you don't need a partner anymore to make yourself complete, because you complete yourself, you know, the masculine and the feminine. And it's interesting because if you look in Peruvian culture, in Peru, a Peruvian man can't be a shaman unless he has a woman. Like, I think that's kind of how I was told. The prerequisite is that you are married, because then you have your sacred, sometimes the English language eludes me, but you have your sacred partner who completes you. But I think this is a physical manifestation of what should go on within ourselves, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the word harmony. That's really what it comes down to. Even there are these two things, like we said before, these two different, you know, polarities, if you will. Even just look at like a battery. There's a positive and negative aspect to a battery, but they need to be part of the same battery in order for the thing to be a functional unit. And that harmony is really where it comes down to. So it's yeah, of course, like honoring self-expression. If you want to do whatever you want to do, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting other people, you should absolutely do that. And also remembering that we have these inherent characteristics that the creator gave us, however you want to look at it, for a reason. And whether or not we want to learn from it is the choice that is presented before us. And now with the culture, it's like there's this definitive, no, that was wrong, I get to choose what's going on. It's again one of those things like, let's not learn, let's just do what we want. And it's completely disregarding the fact of harmony, of like there's a purpose to this. It can be both. We're constantly being pushed to choose one thing or the other, or if you get one thing, you are then like, okay, well, I didn't want this, I'm going to choose what I want. But instead of understanding that, it can be both at the same time. And that's where the real evolution of spirit, I think, comes from. Like you said, it's like eventually we won't necessarily need to have partners in that sense, because we will be complete within ourselves. And then we get to really have a whole new sense of freedom, a much more evolved and amazing sense of freedom, I think. And Uncle Bruce talks about this a lot with the periodic table of elements. You've got the majority of the elements are all out of balance in terms of their atomic structure, and they need to, in order for them to be stable, they need to bind with another atom of some kind. But then you have a special class of elements in the periodic table called noble gases, what makes them noble gases is that they spin as a single atom in harmony without having to bind with anything else. And it's interesting, when they do bind, when two noble gas atoms bind together, they oftentimes form what's called an excitomer. An excitomer is this effect by just the word excited, that these atoms become excited. Two noble gases that are perfectly in balance with themselves come together, and they get so excited, they form a new particle that literally emits laser light. They become enlightened atoms. So this is like that, like noble gases are what they use inside of neon signs, which is why they glow. And the structure is so coherent that when you put them together, they glow. And that's like essentially the evolution of spirit on an atomic level. Is like, yeah, of course, it doesn't mean that all the other atoms are wrong or anything like that. It's just, it's part of it. Everyone that hasn't found balance within themselves yet is going to be attracted or find an attraction to someone else that is out of balance in their own way, and they're going to complete each other. But then there's that learning aspect. I think the whole goal is to become more like the noble gases, where we find the harmony within ourselves at the center, and then we are then attracted to other people within harmony, and then we become more of an enlightened species that way.
Yeah. I mean, everything is vibration. Like you just mentioned, like if you vibrate at a frequency of trauma and hurt, you're going to attract that stuff, right? Lots of times, like even myself, I attracted women of similar nature, that were jealous or abusive for a long time, because I was kind of swinging. I must have somehow vibrated at a vibration that attracted that, because at that time it completed me, and I was kind of subconsciously looking for that. And
yeah, and there's a purpose to it. Again, it's like a lot of times when we go through experiences like that, if we make quote unquote mistakes or have regret, when we have something that we regret, oftentimes we beat ourselves up so much over it out of a natural, just like, oh my God, I don't want to do that again. But then we end up living in that regret, and it just reinforces that pattern, where then we just keep attracting those things into our lives. If we start to recognize that, again, there's regret, it's not bad, it's okay to have regret, but to live in that regret's the difference. Is like, I have regrets from my past about all sorts of things. But the thing that is always a challenge, and as we spiral through life and we have fractal experiences of things that have happened in the past in different circumstances, we're again presented with that choice. Do you want to live this, or do you want to learn from it? And so that's something that I try to encourage myself and others, and just try to emanate as a way of life, is that it's okay to have these things, and we need to learn forgiveness. Forgiveness is a huge aspect of this evolution of spirit, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, the hardest part is forgiving ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's where most of us struggle with,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay. I mean, it's the world as it is right now. We're in an interesting time. We're in an interesting time with challenges and amplifying everything, whatever's going on right now. And there's all sorts of things I'm sure we can get into, but with what's going on, it's amplifying all of this sensation and reactivity. And there's an example I like to use from movies, from Ghostbusters Part 2, that I think perfectly demonstrates what's going on right now. And in Ghostbusters 2, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this, but there's in New York City, there's this like supernatural ooze that's rising up from underneath the city, and it seems to be making everybody angry. The more ooze that there is, the more angry people are getting, and they're looking at the ooze saying like, this ooze is making us all angry, and they have to stop the ooze from rising. But then you find out that it's actually not the ooze that's making people angry. It's not like an anger ooze. The ooze just amplifies whatever emotional state you have. So once they figure that out, they start like, they put the ooze on a toaster oven, and instead of being mean to each other, they just start talking to the toaster oven with the ooze, and they're like, you're such a nice toaster oven, we love you, and they put on nice music, and then the ooze actually makes people happier. So it's like there's this, and I would attribute that to like what's going on in the world right now. You know, we've talked about the movement of our solar system through the galaxy and different regions of space that may be more highly charged with ionic particles or fields of energy. And, you know, it's like, as the planets move around the sun and the solar system moves in the galaxy, we're moving through fields of energy and fields of space that are changing the vibration. So it's like we're moving through this energy field right now that's amplifying everything that's going on. And if we're experiencing fear, and if we're experiencing stress, it only amplifies that. And you can look at the world and say, look how terrible, everything is getting worse, everything is getting worse. But if we change our perception that it's not what is happening that's the problem, it's how we react to what's happening that is causing the problem. So if we change how we react to the situation, we change our perceptions and learn from the indigenous cultures on this planet that have been almost wiped out completely, they have living examples of how to live in harmony on this planet, how to live in harmony with each other and with the greater spirit as a whole, that we can easily transform this crazy situation within a relative blink of the eye. It is so much easier than we think. And it's like we go forward and think, oh, there's no example of peace on this earth. Oh, it's just survival of the fittest. It's just been like ever since like 2001 Space Odyssey. Once we learned how to fight each other, then it's just been war ever since. There's no living record of peace on this planet. That it's completely incorrect, because there has been a long era of peace on this planet. We just don't remember it. And the indigenous people of this world are the sacred space holders, the Isumatoks of this world that hold space for that reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there's like this guy, this gentleman, very wise man, Leonard Cardinal. He's a ceremonial man. And we had a talk once about like what we just discussed before when I talked about how colonization happened over thousands of years. And he actually said, like, in the old days, all cultures had those ceremonies, you know, sweat lodge, shake tent, like all over the world, ceremonies like this were being facilitated and held by people. So that's not an exclusive indigenous thing. But he said we were actually the lucky ones because we were colonized last. So we still remember. Because if you look, like European cultures, it happened so long ago that the Druids were killed off and their ceremonies were taken from them. People in Western civilization have been wandering lost aimlessly for a long time. And I think that's why Western people, in a sense, maybe are a little bit more disconnected. And sometimes gullible too, you know, to what the government presents to them, unfortunately.
Sometimes sometimes gullible. Yeah.
But like, even like if you look in indigenous cultures, like here in Canada, like there's communities where Christianity and the colonization has had such an impact that they're fairly lost themselves too, you know, and there's a slow emergence. But to kind of circle back to what we talked about, like going through space and those different energies and areas, it almost seems like that humanity is at a brink of a mass awakening, you know. But maybe there's also a push from the other side to kind of contain this a little bit.
Yeah. To
And
keep
if you
us
look
asleep.
at like, yeah, keep you asleep. And the thing is too, with lockdowns, you know, one can argue, okay, there's a virus going around, and I'm not questioning that. But a best way to stop people from sharing, communicating, and flourishing is to keep them apart. And that's what we've been seeing for the last 2 years. We're not supposed to visit, we're not supposed to have gatherings and talk. I mean, granted, you can do that stuff on the internet, but here too, we see there's a lot of effort in censoring, people sharing and coming together and all those things. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is a crazy world. There's a crazy time. What can I say? I mean, I'm glad. I live in the middle of nowhere. We live in the bush, and life is normal here, like when we go outside, the birds, the animals, everything, they're still around, they're visiting with us. The trees still whisper and talk away. I mean, if you would not know, because you would have a cell phone or whatever, you wouldn't know there's anything going on in the greater world. I think, like you mentioned, fear is a big driving factor in this. Like I'm still kind of like, I saw that somebody wrote this once, and I saw where it says, if you would have a genuine pandemic going on, you wouldn't have to have advertisement 24/7. And the one thing that strikes me as odd is how this fear has been pushed for 2 years nonstop. If you really would have a loving, caring government, and there would be an absolute deadly pandemic out there, they would reassure you, that you will be okay, that they're doing everything that they can to make sure that we're okay. But we haven't seen that. What we've seen is nonstop, you're not going to be okay. Like, it's almost like we're all going to die 24/7, and what fear and this kind of stress and trauma does to our immune system, to our nervous system overall. I think it takes 28 days of torture to break a man, of absolute fear. We've been way past 28 days. So
Yeah,
like they're not just breaking us, mentally, they're breaking people's spirit. And like, for me, the worst part is what they're doing to the children.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know. I find it very baffling to see what is going on in the world. And I know people get sick, but I also attribute this, like you and I talk lots over the phone with each other. And so for the listeners who don't know, we talk lots, and we had that discussion before, and I know people think it's hocus pocus, but liquor stores are open during lockdowns when other things are not essentials. We're still having junk foods, kids eating cereals and all kind of stuff that kids probably shouldn't consume. There's no emphasis on eating maybe organic food that is not sprayed by Monsanto or whatever. And I mean, we can open a can of worms here, but it doesn't seem like the government has the interest of our health overall. Like we can smoke, we can drink, we can eat junk food and all that, but nobody talks about vitamin intakes or breathing exercises or
Exercise.
Exercise,
being in the sunlight.
Yeah, so everything that was suggested by the government is counterproductive or counterintuitive as well. They lock you inside the house without fresh air and sunlight. You can't see your social circles, or even like people. I know people, they haven't seen their parents for 2 years, or the grandkids haven't seen them for 2 years, and we need that. We need that human connection to get the endorphins going, to release certain hormones,
Yeah.
And then we're breathing our own stuff in with the mask. Like, and all this back and forth. I mean, we can go, that might be another podcast if we want to keep it a little spiritual, but I don't know. Every ounce of my being says something is horribly wrong here, and it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up at all.
No, it doesn't add up from the perspective that we are talking about here. It does add up when you look at this world through the eyes of separation. And like, just to again spiral back to that part about the just the fear and how much it's governing our way of life. We don't remember that okay. Now, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But the idea of like there's the waking up, a great awakening, and then there's those that want to push, kind of keep us asleep. That's again awake and asleep. Another one of these bifurcation polarity zones of like, okay, it's either on or it's off, like ones and zeros. You can't have a light switch on and off at the same time, right? So we live in some sort of illusion where it's either on or it's off. You're either awake or you're asleep. But when you get down to like more of a deeper quantum level of things, especially that word quantum of things, it's not as black and white or polarized like that. For example, dreaming. You can be asleep and having a dream and not aware that you're sleeping, and then wake up and be like, oh man, that was a nightmare. Oh, I was having a dream. I woke up and I was having a dream. This is the real world. Like the Matrix, you either take this pill, you go to sleep, you take this pill, you'll wake up. But that little gray zone in there, which is I think really where we're moving towards an awareness of, and this is what we need to encourage in ourselves and remember and within the community, is that there's this thing called lucid dreaming where you're asleep but you awaken within the dream. So you are awake and asleep at the same time. There's and it's not even, and there's a new sense that comes up that transcends either state of waking and sleeping. And it has to do, I think, with just awareness or attention. Suddenly we become aware of our current situation to the point where we will be asleep, but realize we're dreaming while we're dreaming. And then from that point on, you could, you're in magic land. You are in magic land. If you're having a nightmare and all of a sudden you realize you're dreaming, I've done this so many times before where I would just be in some kind of weird stress dream. Usually it's like at school from when I was in high school or something years ago. And I'm just like, all of a sudden I'm running around trying to get to my chemistry class and I don't know where it is. Oh my God, I haven't done all the homework. And then all of a sudden I turn the corner and little things catch my eye. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm dreaming. Like I did, this is years ago. Like I'm not in high school anymore. And then at that very moment, suddenly this is what I always do. Every time I become aware in a situation like that, I just remember, oh yeah, I can fly. And then I just fly away. And then it's just complete creation after that. I'm still asleep, but awake within the dream. And this is what we need to remember right now, I think, is that we can wake up within the stream so much so because there's constant tribalism and going back and forth between these, one side or the other. And like you said, community is so important. We can wake up within this dream.
I think what we need to wake up to is the fact that we're co-creators.
Yeah.
We talked about this before in one of our lengthy phone calls, but like the word for our programs on TV programming and broadcasting, like language is important, programming, casting. So it's spells, and we're under a spell. You can see it. People are absolutely under a spell. They would take 5 freaking shots and still wear a mask and get tested every day. Like for what? If this vaccine really would work, then why do you need to wear the mask? And why do you still need to get tested? Like it's an absolute spell and people are hypnotized. And like sometimes that's where we have to find the compassion too, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Because I feel sad. Like if you look at some people, like they've been under like intense fear for 2 years and people don't look too fresh anymore. Like it's not a good sight.
No. And then again, the measures that we are being told to take are protection measures, like, a COVID shot, because it's not a vaccine. And in fact, the word vaccine itself had the definition in Webster's dictionary was recently changed and modified. Yeah. Originally, I'm paraphrasing here, but definition of vaccine was more something that basically led to an immunity. And they completely removed the word immunity from the definition of vaccine to this point. They've added a bunch of other stuff, but the key thing to remember is they took out immunity because the vaccines, these shots, the COVID shots themselves, they're more of a treatment, if anything, a radical experimental treatment, but they're not bringing immunity. And that's a fact. No, everyone knows that and still pushing along in this narrative. And then, masks, wearing a mask, protection, social distance, protection. It's all protection, and protection is good. We need to have protection. If you're under threat, you want to be able to As Uncle Bruce says, if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you want to be able to engage your adrenal protection response system and be able to run away and get away and protect yourself. But we're not meant to live in a chronic state of protection. And that's like what we're in right now. Like you said, 2 years of constant fear. And it goes back even further than that. It's just getting more and more afraid. The thing that we're not being encouraged to do is encourage our growth, which is the opposite of protection from a biological sense. And what does that mean? All the things we just said: taking our vitamins, getting sunlight, getting exercise, de-stressing our system as much as possible through things like as simple as breathing, conscious breathing exercises. If we were to be eating healthy, these are things that would absolutely bring us to a much better state of existence. Stress is the number one killer on this planet. Stress will destroy people's lives, and a lot of cancers are brought on from stress, and that's a fact. So it's good to have both. We don't want to not be able to protect ourselves, but like you were saying, like some people haven't been able to see their family in 2 years now.
I mean, it rips families apart. Like, I know families, they don't let their children visit anymore because the children decided not to get vaccinated. It's just absolutely ludicrous,
Yeah. It is. And
I mean, knocking on wood, for the last 2 years, my family, I have 4 kids. We've been traveling all over Canada, like going to ceremonies. One of my sons, Noah, the newest one, just had health problems. We've been in hospitals. I worked through the pandemic, went out to communities when people didn't want to go because they were afraid. Drove around people that had tested positive with COVID, and I figured it out later. Delivered traditional medicines into houses of people that had COVID or had like active COVID that were sick. And nothing ever happened to me. And not saying like I'm better than anybody else, I don't want to jinx it, but in a ceremony, the grandpas told us, they're like, basically gave humanity shit. And they said, instead of cowering at home and being afraid, why aren't you not going out and helping people? Why are you guys not helping each other? And that, I think that is the biggest problem,
Yeah.
If you talk about Bruce Lipton and our body and cellular memory, we're one human, breathing, living organism. And we all are a cell in this organism. And right now what we're doing is we're not working in harmony together to make this one living, breathing organism healthy. So we're breeding cancer within the communities, if you want to, so to speak. This has been going on for years, like wars and all kind of things. And I'm proud to be a white guy, and I'm proud to be a black guy. And now we're going to get in another controversial territory here. And I already apologize in advance to all the listeners, but this is all baloney, I understand that when people say all life matters, some other communities may be upset because their community has been disappropriately treated for such a long time. And I understand that this is happening and has occurred for a really long time, but we have to break out of this spell too. It's a spell, there's a reason why we're in it, because it serves a bigger agenda, but we have to snap out of it. We're one human family. We all have the same spirit. That's what the grandpas always tell us in ceremony. It doesn't matter what color of your skin you are. We all are one human family. Like the Lakota would say, all my relations, and that includes everybody.
Obviously.
Yeah,
Inherently.
I understand. Some people some people get a kick out of it, or like the right to be offended and to be upset. I mean, it's all good. If you feel like you need to be offended or a little bit upset, that's okay. Feel through it, but eventually we need people to knock people out of the spell. And I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but it's still a part of that hypnosis that we spoke before, and it's victimhood. Like one thing that they teach you in, like, let's say, if you want to call it like shamanic training, that sounds weird, but it's the triangle. There's only 3 roles we play in life: the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. And we have to step out of this triangle, lots of times. Like you and I, the listeners, let's reflect. When are we the victim? When are we the perpetrator and when are we the rescuer? And if we look consciously and honestly at ourselves, most of our action are in this triangle. You know, lots of times, even when we are younger, oh, we want to have a girlfriend and we can help her. Then we're the rescuer. And then sometimes we're dicks to each other. We're the perpetrator. And lots of times we feel so sorry for ourselves because what happened to ourselves was really not okay. Then we're in the victim. We have to step out of it, everybody. And we kind of, I'm not sure if we're running out of time, but
no, we're not. We have all the time in the world.
We have all the time in the world, but we got to get out of it. You know, we have to lift each other up. We have to hold each other up. We have to support each other. We have to help each other. And we can't be afraid to do it. If somebody calls me right now and says, Steve, I need medicine and I have COVID, I can't leave the house, can you bring it to me? I will bring it to that person. And when I say medicine, I don't mean pills, you know, we bring herbs, stuff that grew on the land that we prayed over. And that's another thing. I know people like Christianity has done such a number on people like that. They don't even want to have anything to do with prayer, or they think that the only way to pray is the way they pray. We have to find our individual way how to pray to nature, to a higher power, to the earth, to the medicines. We have to go back to those things, you know. We have to learn to be grateful. That's one other thing. We have to learn to be grateful for the things that we have.
Yeah.
You know, my wife and I, we just bought this place. And there was even a moment where I was like, what have we done? It needs a lot of work and all those things. But over the last few months we were in here, I'd really learned to love this place. And now with the possibility not being able to go back to my job because I don't have the vaccine, and when it really dawned on me, hey, I could lose this place, I really realized gratitude is the biggest thing, you know, for our health. Every morning we should be grateful that we have another day, grateful that we're awake, grateful that we have the things that we have around us. But again, people are so conditioned under the spell. Oh, this is just a Galaxy 9. Ooh, like who would use this stuff now, man? This is so last year's. And people look at you weird when you have your phone for 4 years. Well, why do I need an upgrade? My phone is still working. Like, I'm grateful I have a phone. Other people don't have a phone. And like, I mean, we could talk for hours, but you know, I think gratitude, number one.
Yeah, gratitude number one. It's great being grateful. And it's like that. That's a really amazing chapter from the shamanic textbook about the triangle, about the victim, the what was it? There's the victim, the persecutor, and then the perpetrator. Yeah. So you got this vicious cycle of learning, and that we are basically being encouraged to step out of, because there's only it's a circle. It's, as much as it's a triangle, it's a very hard lined, avenue. And then if you look at geometry, and you can encircle the triangle, there's constantly stepping out of the program. That's just the evolution of the spirit of the point of awareness, is constantly expanding our point of view. And it's amazing to think too about that concept of victimhood and ceremony. Something I wanted to ask you, just for people listening right now, that you mentioned grandfathers a lot, when the grandfathers told us this and all that. When you say grandfathers, what is it exactly we're talking about? Because is it of course it's fractal. There are our physical grandfathers and our ancestry and all that, but when you're talking about grandfathers and grandmothers, what is it that we're talking about here?
So in Cree, they would call them the Atayochan. The Atayochan, the ones that tell the stories. But if you go like to a shake tent and the grandpa comes in, there's spirits on the other side of the veil, you know? And not just in Cree culture, but I think that's another thing that is maybe purposely kept from us, is that when we speak to the creator, like, or God, or that entity, however you want to name it, there's actually no way that we can directly communicate with this entity. We can't be in direct contact with this entity. Like, we would disintegrate if it's like the sun. It would burn your life. You would cease to exist if you get too close to that thing that we call the creator or God. So in the Cree culture, they have the pipe. that speaks on our behalf, or they have the grandfathers, the Atayohanak, that speak on our behalf. So when we do ceremony, we ask the good grandpas and grandmas that sit in the light. So they're already on the other side and they sit in the light, and they can go and speak on our behalf to the Creator. And maybe, like I said, maybe that was kept from us on purpose. You know, like when I was a kid in Switzerland, we had to go to church. It was mandatory. So we had to go, I think, till we were 16. And it felt dead to me. You know, like you go into this church, you have this fancy dress guy up there, gold everywhere. But it's, in a sense, it's a dead religion. There is no way for you to connect to what they're talking about. It's, again, blind faith, you know, just like the government. Oh, I'm the person of authority. I'm telling you there is a God, and you just need to believe me. But there is no way for you to have a substantial experience of this sacred place or energy that they're talking about. And then when I moved to Canada, and I was fortunate, or however you want to call it, that I've met those elders, and they kind of took me under their wing and allowed me to come to their ceremony and shared some of their knowledge with me. And when I went to the shake tent and like some sweat lodges for the first time, that's the first time I really felt that love, that power that exists outside of us and inside of us, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a weird thing again, you know, because in Native culture, they want you to experience that. They want you to know that you have that power, that you can change your life, that you can step out of this triangle, that you can co-create. While all other religions, it's kind of like, yeah, we want you to believe, but that's kind of where it stops. We want you to believe there's a God, and he's a good, kind God. But no, you can't experience.
Yeah, but don't piss them off either.
Yeah, don't piss them off.
There's that God fearing, you know, like there's that God fearing adage that comes with a lot of these religions. I'm a God fearing American or whatever. And a lot of these religions, they all started with something good, like I said before, but there's like you mentioned the word belief, you know, just like take my word for it. Here, read this book. We're going to read this story and we're going to talk about what the meaning of the story is. And if you can consciously understand, get down to the connection to the story, then you will have some sort of insight that will help your faith and belief in this thing. Because like you mentioned, there's a veil like that we can't necessarily see behind. And this is why we have to have beliefs in the first place, like even down to our consciousness. There's the conscious mind. This is the part of me that's aware and talking to you right now. But then there's the subconscious mind that I'm not thinking about, that's keeping me alive by beating my heart without thinking about it, allowing me to breathe while I'm talking to you without having to think about it, or even my movements and being able to extract ideas from my memory to be able to tell you things. There's a veil there that we can't see behind. And this is why we have beliefs, is to their stories that we tell each other, or we tell ourselves really, about what's on the other side. And there's a purpose to them. They allow us to function and to move through this reality, and have the experience to have option and choice to learn from this stuff. But it's just a funny thing at the center of the word belief, right? We've got these symbols at the center of the word belief. You remove the edges, and the word right in the middle you're left with is lie. And it's just right there in front of us the whole time. We don't realize that at its core, they're lies. It's not true in the sense of like, what we don't know what's on the other side of this veil. So we make up stories about what's on the other side and we believe it. And sometimes, but we forget that they're just stories, and we take them so seriously. We are ultimately lying to ourselves about thinking that we know something when we really don't. And like what you were talking about with a lot of indigenous cultures, and just having these kind of emissaries that are intermediaries between our side of the veil and the other side of the veil and the creator that allow us to have this communion of spiritual connection. This whole idea of having a direct connection is something that is completely antagonistic to the authority structure, like you talked about, whether it's government or just to stick even with religion. Take my word for it, I will tell you what's on the other side, or I will, if you don't know, I'm here, trust me, like a doctor. Even you don't know about your health, I know about it, I went to school, I will tell you. And then you put trust in that person. And there's something good that can come with that. It's not required that you need to know everything. It's okay to have these leaders that can help us, walk us through. Like, this is the purpose of a shaman. But there are ways that we can individually have this connection, have these ceremonies within our own selves and within our communities, and even larger, perhaps, to have that direct connection through the process and protocols of however we need to. Because we may not be able to stand outside the atmosphere with the sun, but we can have ways of being able to harness the sun without actually having to go to the sun. Like, we can learn about how to grow plants without having to actually touch the sun to do it. And it makes me think too, there was just a story I heard, I can't remember where or when, but the nature of community and our connection to the creator, how it was one and whole, and that line of connection was strong, and then eventually how it got separated. And there was this domestication of community and spiritual connection where you had the group and you had the leader. Let's just call him a shaman, or her a shaman. We'll call it the shaman at the top. You got the shaman who is there conducting a ceremony in a setting. A long time ago, it was in a situation where everybody, like in an auditorium, let's just say, there's the leader at the front on the podium. Everyone is facing the same direction. We're all praying in the same way. But there came a shift at some point or another, and even symbolically, where that shaman or that leader turned around and started facing the audience. So instead of everybody looking through like a filter, everyone was filtering and funneling through this individual with knowledge or wisdom about this stuff. Now we're looking directly into the eyes of that person. They're looking at us. So there became this like feedback loop where instead of having a direct flow and conduit to the creator, we had this domesticated, like now there's a middleman. Now they're the ones that know, and we have to take their word for it. So that's like symbolically where we are in so many levels, whether it's government, whether it's medicine, whether it's religion. We have this same thing, and it's definitely a problem. But we've come out of it before. We have not always been like this. There have been resurgences of this knowing, and this whole idea of belief. I think we're moving out of the age of belief into an age of knowing. And the big difference is, well, how do you know? How can you really know what's on the other side of the veil? You can't, like you said, it's like we can't really know the creator on that level because we would just disintegrate. It's just there's that boundary. But the question lies within the center of the word knowing. If you remove the beginning and the end of the word knowing, you have the word now. If we live in the present, if we live and experience the present moment for what it is and how we feel it, then we truly know. And that's where gnosis is. That's where a lot of religions had uprisings of this knowingness, that we can know ourselves and know each other, know the creator without having any authority figure to tell us what's going on. Everyone has that access. But then, of course, it gets, the authorities come in and say, no, get rid of the K and get rid of all that stuff. And we're just going to say, no now, just no.
Yeah, but like, I mean, in a sense, the middleman is not a bad thing if you look at how it works in ceremony, that the Atayohan are the middleman that speak on your behalf. I think the problem that we have is that the middleman that we have chosen at this point in time are just ordinary human beings. Like even in Switzerland, the priest that I had to see when I was a kid, he eventually cheated on his wife and the whole town knew it. And then he divorced her and married another woman. And then I was like, doesn't sound very godly to me. And then there was another priest that my mom knew, and she asked him once, point blank, do you actually believe in God? And he couldn't answer that. You know, so be it religion or politicians, as long as we have ordinary human beings that still function out of their lower nature, greed, ego, and all that, then obviously those middlemen are no good and will lead us nowhere. They will only lead us astray.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Like, there will come a time where we will find this knowing again, that we are powerful beyond measures. Like, if you want to go from a biblical standpoint, in the Bible it says, Jesus said, what I do, you will be able to do, and much more. So why has nobody done it yet? Because I believe we've been intentionally led astray from this truth, from this knowing, from this discovering, you know?
I believe it too. I mean, it's not, we could say belief, but yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about this. We talk a lot about this. Yeah, there is overwhelming evidence that shows we've been led astray deliberately, intentionally away from this whole reality. And it's in recent times very obvious, and not as obvious in the past, in the ancient past, which is what guides a lot of what's going on in the world today, the mythology and stuff like that. It's just primitive people that made stories up about the world. They didn't know any better, and none of it was actually real. It was, we can like all the stuff in the Old Testament and the Garden of Eden, or even the Mesopotamian stories or the Greek stories. Oh, those were just stories to help, give people moral compass to like how to live in this world. But there is evidence even in those stories that shows we've been deliberately misled away from this evolution of community into a higher being and connection with that, and to remember the power in our sovereignty and as conscious creative beings living in this human experience. I mean, just it's overwhelming. Once you start to see it from that perspective, like it exists, it's been right there in front of us the whole time. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing to see. There's like there's a line in do you ever see the movie Galaxy Quest by any chance?
No.
It's just like this Star Trek kind of world. It's a TV show, a bunch of actors, and then some aliens happened to see the TV show and thought that the actors were like really who they were. So that this alien species builds the spaceship from the TV show and brings the actors from Earth to play, to basically command the ship, but they're just actors. Yeah. So there's like all these fans and everything like that. And then once they finally come to this realization that it's all real, like they're trying to get help from the fans of the show on Earth. And the fans are like, oh, but it's just a TV show. And the guy's telling them, he's like, no, it's all real. It's all real. And that's that. A lot of times throughout the day, multiple times a day, that's how I feel. I'm like, oh my God, it's all real. It's all real. Once you make that shift and you see that this is happening, it's hard to avoid it.
Absolutely. But I need to go check on my kids soon.
Yeah.
What we need to do, we're going to close this out in a good way now. So I'm going to share something that was taught to me, and just for you and the listeners, I will share it quickly, and I don't share it in detail because I don't want anybody to write this down or whatever. But it's the view of the medicine wheel. There's a lot of different approaches to this medicine wheel. This is one that was shared with me, and it will make sense why I share this in a second. But if you look at the medicine wheel, and that's the same with the tree of life, it has two sides, right? Tree of life grows up, there's a tree of life that grows down. There's one side to the medicine wheel, there's the other side to the medicine wheel. And it goes back to the thing that we talked about, that we are kept intentionally maybe in a loop that is not beneficial to us. But in Cree cultures, 4 grandfathers were gifted to us at birth. So wind, buffalo, sun, and water. And they correlate with our life. So let's say when the water breaks, the first thing we take is a breath. So water, wind, then buffalo and sun. But water is carrying. So when we are born, no, the wind is carrying. So when we are born as a baby, the only thing we really want is being cared for, right? We want to be held, we want to be fed, we want to be cared for. And most people can relate to that. When we grow up, when we're children, our feeling is very intense. So we can feel if something is wrong with our parents, or we're very connected to our feeling, and we can relate. Like my son Noah, shortly after he was born, he looked around and he saw his brothers, and he knows, like, he belongs into this family, he can relate. And now he laughs at everybody like he's 2 months old, but he already knows those are my relations. That's where, I'm cared for, I feel good. And the other one is respect. So it's care, feeling, relating, and respect. So when we live with this medicine wheel, then we listen. We're in the now. We can hear the grandfathers. We're in the knowing. But then there's also the opposite medicine wheel, where instead of caring, we have like self-pity. We don't care. Instead of caring, we don't care. I don't care about that. And it's not my problem, if they don't take the shot, I hope they die, or I don't care what happens to them. Instead of feeling good about ourselves, feeling good about our surroundings, being grateful, we have insecurities. We feel like I'm not good enough, I can never do that, and all that stuff. And that ties back into the competition, the cell phone, the Facebook, and everybody has it better than me world, right? Then instead of relating, we have envy. So we're jealous of what this guy has, or the person that he's dating, and all those things. And then instead of respect, we have resentment. We resent this person for what they have done, or for how they live their lives, or for the color of their skin, or how they identify, or whatever you want, right? And then instead of listening inside, we have possessiveness and jealousy. So knowing that, it would kind of make sense why they're trying to keep us in the darker medicine wheel rather than in the lighter medicine wheel. And hopefully we can flip it all, and we all can come together as a community and, like I said, help each other, lift each other up, and rebuild, something better, something kinder. But we should do that again. We should do that like maybe once a week, we get together.
I agree. This just for everyone listening right now, we didn't plan anything about this. We just got into a flow, and I am so thrilled to be here with you and to share this experience and to have these conversations, because it's just so uplifting in general. I mean, there's so much crazy stuff going on in the world. I feel uplifted about this, and it's really like when you say, I hope we can build a better world, or I hope we can build a more sustainable, however you want to call it, I actually feel inspired by that. And it's just, awareness is a huge part of it. And let's do this again at least once a week, because we have a zillion things to talk about.
Oh, so much. But I think it's also important to kind of close this out with saying that I didn't want to offend anybody, or anything. Like, that's not my intention. My intention is to share love, to uplift, to help, to support, and all that. But I think some things need to be kind of talked about, and we kind of live in an age where people are, in my opinion, a little bit too easily offended. And again, we need to step out of the triangle,
Yeah. The victimhood triangle. Victimhood is not a badge to be celebrated. It's a triangle to be stepped outside of. And there's all of those things. Yeah, I would hope so too. And the same things, same thing with me. There's no all, put in a positive affirmation. All we have are intentions to share awareness and discuss things that are going on in the world right now through a perspective of love, compassion, forgiveness, freedom, balance, harmony, evolution, creation. These are all things that oftentimes could be controversial. However, we are not afraid, and but we are also patient and I can, and mindful that some of these things may people may be upset, and that's okay. It isn't our intention. But if anything, we love you, and I love you, Steve.
I love you too, Alex.
And it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, and it's the same in my house. Like sometimes my kids, I'm not sure. Yeah, sometimes they can upset me, or can, like for little kids, sometimes when they're mad, they can say things that are hurtful, you know. And my wife can point out things that I need to work on, and for an instance, it takes me back, and I'm like, that was not nice, and that kind of maybe got a little defensive still. That's just life, you know. But we have to learn to come together as a family again, one big human family. And like you said, like I have love for everybody, and I feel everybody deserves a life of happiness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We're all human beings. Yeah. We can make mistakes, and that's okay. And through community, compassion, understanding, all of these things, we can work through it. And life is one big ceremony. Life is one big honoring of our relationship between ourselves and the environment. And the more that we are mindful of that and take initiative as co-creators to control the not to control as much, because that could be an intense word, but to influence these ceremonies and influence this life in a positive way, we can really transform our perceptions and our way of life in a much more powerful way. Our words carry a lot of meaning. Our emotions carry a lot of meaning. How we react carries a lot of meaning. So we don't have to live in this. We do have to live in this world, but we don't have to be. We don't have to be stuck in this world. No. And so that is important. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Steve. Thank everybody. And I so appreciate your wisdom and your stories. Even now, it's just like, there's always something new. There's always something new to learn. And I'm so happy about that.
I'm very grateful too that we had the opportunity to sit together and talk like this.
Yes. Well, let's do it again.
Oh, absolutely, Alex.
All right, Steve. Well, my love to the family, and I'll be talking to you later today. I'm going to get this up on the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll see you again next time.
Okay. Ciao, Alex.
Oh, wait, hold on.